Well, AOC announced she's freezing her eggs. Yeah. Yeah, she said as a young liberal female running for president, she'd prefer to wait until after the election to have her first abortion. Yeah. You don't want to get that first abortion too soon. Here's her on freezing her eggs. This was the other thing that happened today.
Don't be weird about this. Even though I know all of you will be. Okay. That wasn't so bad.
She is very charming when she's on like social media. She has a good way of connecting with people and doing sort of like down to earth stuff that would make you relate to her, right? Which is why this is a little bit disturbing to me. So, you know, AOC is in a weird window of life where she obviously has ambitions to run for president. That window is closing, right? She's basically got to take this shot coming up in 2 years in 2028. At the same time, because it only comes up every 8 years potentially, right? Maybe every 16 years. So this is her window. It's closing. At the same time, so is her fertility window, right? She's 37. So in another 2 years, she's pushing 40. That's pretty much towards the latter end of the fertility window, right? So she's faced with this dilemma. What does she do? Because she hasn't had a kid yet. Obviously she wants to, or to keep her options open. So she's freezing her eggs. And she's pushing this as like a big, body autonomy. Women should be able to decide when they have children, all within the means of their bodies and everything. Here's my very unpopular opinion on this. I know it's very unpopular. I don't know that it's morally right, but I think it is the right opinion, which is I think that hormonal birth control was a big mistake for women and for men and for the human race in general. I think when you look at the declining birth rate, not just in the US, but in like every country across the globe, I think what's happening is we don't have any happy accidents anymore. Do you guys remember hearing that phrase at all when you were growing up? Like, parents would always talk about their kids, like, oh, how'd you have your first kid? And they're like, oh, he was our happy accident, right? Oh, he's the best mistake we ever made, right? That's how they would talk about their kids. And I think the problem is when you give people so much choice of like narrowing down exactly what guy they're going to have a kid with, exactly when they want to have a kid. Oh, maybe they want to work for another decade more and be a boss bitch and have the money too, so they can make just as much as a man and still have the family. They can push it till close to 40 if they want, right? What happens is people never make that decision. They just push it off and push it off and push it off. And so there's no more happy accidents anymore. Turns out that the main way of having kids was by mistake, right? Like, who's going to choose to have a kid? It is a huge inconvenience. It sounds horrible. The only way you have kids is by mistake. And it just doesn't really happen anymore, right? You have AOC here, right? Who's a beautiful, intelligent woman. She's been engaged to her boyfriend for the past 4 years, since 2022, right? They haven't got married yet. She's been dating him since college. So what is that, like a decade? And yeah, and I understand even for her, it's like she's got this, she's like the final boss battle of boss bitches, right? If she can become the first female president of the U.S., that's the final boss bitch, right? I understand that's a big ambition, but she had all this time and she never at any point, even with a dedicated partner who she's been with this whole time, at no point did she feel like, okay, I'm ready to have kids right now. I can have them now and I can still do whatever, right? She pushed it off and pushed it off and pushed it off and pushed it off. And I think it's just so hard, even if you're a guy, to have a kid these days. I'm wondering if I should say something or not. I'll say something embarrassing. I've ejaculated in a fair amount of vaginas in my day. Not like a ton, not an obscene amount, but it's happened before. Enough that you would think, looking at my history of having inseminated vaginas, I should have some kids by now. And I just don't. Because the reality is, as a guy, in order to have a kid, you got to first get through hormonal birth control, which is something the woman has been put on and basically spaded with since she first hit puberty. What age do they get put on hormones, right? Like, isn't it before 16? Probably 13 or something? Ridiculous. So you got the hormonal layer. Even if you get past that, or if she's not on birth control, she can just go out the next morning and be like, oh, I want to get a plan B, and just take a pill and eliminate the kid, right? Even if you can get past that, it's like abortions are a dime a dozen on every street corner. She can typically just go to like any place and without your consent at all and be like, oh, I'll just kill the baby, right? So women have more bodily autonomy than they have ever had in history, right? And yet the human race seems to be doing worse than it's, at least population-wise, than it's been doing ever in history, right? Because it seems like something that would benefit people, giving women more choice. But I think what ends up happening is then they just end up waiting longer and longer for the perfect time, the perfect guy, overthinking every little thing. You know how women make decisions, right? Not the quickest decision makers in the world. Would oftentimes prefer to outsource their decisions to guys, right? But so they think and think and think and decide and decide and decide, and then all of a sudden it's too late, right? And we end up with collapsing population, and I think the women generally are unhappy, right? So sometimes, even if something seems like having more freedom will make you happier, it's actually not the best move in the world. So that's my horribly unpopular opinion. Probably not morally sound, but probably true. I think we would be better off without at least hormonal birth control. At least like not putting every single female on birth control the second they hit puberty and before they can even, and normalizing it like it's something totally normal to just whack everyone's hormones completely for the remainder of their adult life, and they'll still have just as happy outcomes. I mean, nature gave us a sex drive. It's like the strongest drive in the world it could possibly give us, and makes you high when you have sex, because it's so hard to get you to have a kid. It's like, I got to get them really high to get them to do this and make that mistake. And now you have something that's just basically blocking that. And then at the same time, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I think it also just, it's sort of, if you're, the only reason to not be a slut if you were a female in the past was because there were consequences, right? You didn't want to just have sex with like every guy that came along because, well, you could get pregnant. And sure, there was contraception, but it's not 100%, not like hormonal birth control is, closer to 100%. So, you really had to be a little bit more scrutinizing about who you hooked up with. And I think sex meant a little bit more because there actually were those consequences back in the day. Whereas now I feel like everybody's just like, it's just soulless, right? Like, sure, it's fun to have sex, right? I just don't feel like females were ever meant to be like super sluts with no consequences. And not that every female is like that, but I feel like I've met a good amount of girls. I know this isn't the best endorsement for myself, by the way, but I've met a fair amount of girls who do seem to operate that way. It's just like, man, I don't think you were meant for this. Like, there is something to be said for just having that have meaning, and like, I wish we could reel it back. But unfortunately, when you give people more freedom, whether or not it's good for them in the long run, it's nearly impossible to repeal that back.